Hey there, this is Laura Workala with Sewing Genius on YouTube and Laura's Sewing School. So I wanted to try something and I thought you might find it interesting. Maybe it'll be something you want to try and maybe you'll say, oh, that's just too picky to me. I really love matching patterns. And in fact, this fabric, which is Tabby Road by Tula Pink, it's a reissue, mainly in pink colorations. I wanted to back this banner with it, but this banner is 52 inches wide and the fabric, I could maybe squeak 44 inches out of it. So that meant that I needed to put a seam in here. And so if you look, you can't tell that I put a seam in here because I matched the pattern, which is right here. Okay, so the seam is right here. So I thought, oh, you know, even though you don't really see the back of a quilt or a banner or whatever, I really hate that I should have thought further so that if I put a hanging sleeve over this, you only see these three kittens and the tops of these three cats. And I wanted to see these cats. So I thought maybe I could make a hanging sleeve out of the same fabric and have it match at the top so that way you don't get an interruption and you get full kitty cats. So anyway, this is my attempt to do so. So I made a piece of paper here. This is exam table paper, like what you sit on at the doctor's office. I get it in rolls. These got squished when I moved last year. They're usually actually rolls. You can buy them pretty cheaply. I tend to buy a box of a dozen and then just sell them as my students want them. So it ends up being about $8 a roll, 225 feet by 21 inches. So it's a really good deal. I use this for so many things. It's a very handy thing. Right now I'm going to use it to make a pattern so that I can get the placement correct for the hanging sleeve. Now, a hanging sleeve, for those who don't know a lot about quilting, is you want to have a tube sewn to the back of your quilt to protect the quilt from the metal hanging or wood or whatever it is that you're going to hang it up with. So let me just show you. I have a way that I try to eliminate as much hand sewing as I can. I'm going to machine stitch my binding. I did all machine quilting on here. I don't know if you can see in the light, but I'm going to show you the other side of this quilt. And I'm going to be stitching in the ditch to attach the first side of the sleeve. And then I can just do a minimal amount of hand stitching. So do you see this border up here? I've already stitched here, and I don't expect to use a very big rod. So I'm going to stitch in the ditch here through my sleeve on the back. I'll pin it just right and stitch it right in the right place. And hopefully it'll match. I'm going to pin it so it will. And then I will only have just a little bit at each end to sew by hand. So when you put a sleeve on the back of any kind of quilt or banner, most quilt shows want a 4-inch sleeve, and I don't plan to put this in a quilt show, and I want to use this highlight border to stitch in the ditch. Like I said, I'm trying to eliminate hand stitching. The sleeve will be coming down, and then the part that's loose that comes around to the top is actually a 1/2 inch longer than the half of the sleeve, because it's not really a half, that's going here against the quilt and then comes up and around to give space for your rod, because your rod could be 1/2 inch, it could be 3/4 of an inch, something like that. So it will keep the quilt hanging straight in the front, and it won't bulge out. Okay, so this is standard procedure when you do a quilt sleeve. So what I found is that I did cut these borders 2.5 inches. When I finished everything, it turned out that they ended up being the closest to 2 1/8. They should have been 2 1/4, but they weren't. But that's okay, because it's not going to matter. They all match up. So I wanted to make sure the distance from here to here was consistently the same. So I took and I carefully cut 2 1/8 inches from the black to the edge before I started this video. I did that. Then I prepped some of this paper. I decided to cut a piece of paper 1/2 as long, and then I taped it together, just Scotch tape. And then I drew 3 lines. You can see my marks here because I did them with a marker, but I wanted to have precise lines for my pencil lines, so you may or may not be able to see those as well. I put a 1/2 inch line right up here for that extra bit that we need. And then I did a line 2 1/8 below that and another 2 1/8 inch line. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and put this 1/2 inch line right at the top of the quilt, because what I need to match is 2 1/8 inches from the top. So here I go. I'm going to do this. I'm going to use some flower head pins. This is just barely big enough, or it's just big enough. So I'm going to take my flower head pins and let's see. It's good. Okay. I'm going to take my flower head pins and just stick these ever so often, because I don't want this to move, like that, to hold that. So I'm making sure that this is exactly on the edge of the quilt. All right. Of course, the more you stitch it, the more it can shrink it. I hope that I can get this all to match up, because of course I've already quilted it, you know. So my idea here is that this section, the first section, will be hidden, okay? Actually, this will be the part that goes underneath. This will go underneath. This will be on top. I want it to match where it's going to get attached to the quilt, which is 2 1/8 inches from this edge. So I'm going to take a pencil, not too sharp a pencil, because otherwise I'll tear the paper. This is extra paper. I won't need this ultimately. But I'm going to trace obvious shapes here. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to trace the cat, just the outer edge. Oops, it's tearing the paper a little bit. So I just need it to be in the area, like here, this branch is really obvious. And I'll go right around that little ball there. I'm not sure how well you can see it through the paper, but I'm going to trace any of the obvious pieces here to make it easy for me to place this. Here's a ball here, so I'll go around this. So I'm going to keep going along here, all right, and tracing this. Then what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking this fabric here, what I have left. This is the part I took out to make this piece long enough. So what I'll need to do here is I'll need to make sure that I have a cat like right here. And this section will actually work for this part. So then I only need this much for the rest of that. And I'll make sure that I lay this with the tracing on top of here and pin it down and cut it out, making sure the tracings match. And I'll have to put a seam in because I do have like a full width over here that I can use. So I have enough fabric. I'm kind of bummed I'm gonna be cutting it up because I really love this fabric. I think it'd make a great sun hat, you know? Like take one of these kitties and put it on the crown of the hat. But anyway, I have enough. I actually bought what they had left at the shop. I ordered online and I think it was 1.5 yards and I'm gonna end up cutting up a lot of it. So anyway, but I have enough that I can cut across here for what I need, and I'll still have some left, which is really good. So anyway, I'm gonna finish tracing this, and then I'm going to take and lay it on top of that fabric and get my pieces cut, because I'll need 2 sections with a seam. And then I'm going to go ahead and make sure it's cut the right width, because I want to cut it this width, which ends up being 4 3/4 inches of fabric. But I'll be matching the pattern I'm drawing on here to that pattern. And then I will hem the ends. Like I'll cut it the same width as a quilt, and then I tend to hem it in 1 inch on each end total. So I'll maybe fold it 1/2 inch, fold another 1/2 inch, so that the sleeve goes almost to the end of the quilt, to the corners. And then I can sew it here and then sew it up. So I'm going to take a break, and get to a good point. Then I'm going to show you how I'm going to press a fold in my sleeve for the 2 1/8 inch line. I'm going to pin it here so that it matches. Then I'm going to bring it to the sewing machine and sew it, and then see if my idea worked.